Hey folks, Dune Wizard here. Apparently, you can talk about comics on Booktube, so that's what I'm going to do today. Specifically, some of the books that I read this year. If you're real lucky, the cat might show up. I told her she could stay in the room as long as she works the camera, but she's busying herself over there playing in the window, so she may wander over here. So we'll see how that goes. I love comics. I have been reading comics since before I could read. I'm 56 years old. And comics helped me learn how to read when I was really young because I was struggling with all kinds of vision problems and I have dyslexia as well. So my parents started buying me comics and I got obsessed with what the words with the pictures meant and how I was going to be able to tell what the heck was going on. I've always been a Marvel guy. Most of the books that I read growing up were Marvel comics and because to me DC was always kind of silly because I grew up watching, the Batman, Adam West show and reruns. So they were kind of campy and silly. But I also grew up watching the 66, 67 Spider-Man cartoon and the Marvel superheroes cartoon with that limited animation stuff. And to me, looking at Captain America doing his scenes, his fights and stuff during World War II versus watching Batman do the Bat-Tusi, there was no comparison. But as I've gotten older, I've pretty much stopped buying just about anything new. Uh, I don't collect any ongoing series anymore because they just don't have that same punch that books did back in my day. Not to sound like an old man or anything. Just before the pandemic hit back in early 2020, uh, I sold off the bulk of my collection. I had several thousand. I kept about 300, give or take, of the books that meant the most to me, the ones that I continue to go back and reread like all the time. It made it easier for the move. But since then, I've discovered I like trade paperbacks. I used to rail against them because we had a saying back in the day that writers in comics were writing for the trades, so they would pad their stories out just like to ridiculous lengths, like something that would happen in one issue of a comic in say the 80s would take like 6 issues. And I just got tired of being disappointed month after month after month. Also, the level of action has pretty much dried up in particularly Marvel comics. And that's what I'm here for. I love drama. I love the soap opera. I mean, for crying out loud, I read X-Men for years, and that's the soap opera comic. So I started buying trade paperbacks, and there's a difference. Some people call trade paperbacks graphic novels, but I have a bone of contention to pick with that. A graphic novel is a self-contained story in one issue of probably a square bound, book. These are trades. Also, the term graphic novel became a big deal back in the 90s when Vertigo got launched because suddenly all these people who had never read comics before were reading comics. And if you said the word comic book in a comic book store, you were like look down the nose at these people who are reading graphic novels for comics. While we're on the subject of trades, I want to talk about these four in particular. First up, my favorite one this year so far is The Midnight Show. I never heard of this. I guess it started in 23, but wrapped up in 24. It got recommended on Tony Isabella's Facebook page as one of the things that makes him happy. And he and I generally see eye to eye on most comic books. So I checked it out. And if you like if you like horror, this one's for you. If you like classic horror, this one's especially for you. If you don't mind classic horror mixed up with some gore, I can't recommend The Midnight Show enough. I need to do something about the lighting in this place. The Midnight Show was written by Cullen Bunn with art by Brian Hurt and colors by Bill Crabtree. Now, for me, it's the colors. The colors in this book just jump out at you. I'm looking for a good example, just to kind of like look at that, look at that. That's stuff. Now, if you like, the thing I like about this is it's a kind of a cartoon style, which speaks to my sensibilities because I love cartoon style art, especially when you take it and you mix it up into something like this, you know. So it's pretty gory, but it's not like you know, it's not Tim Vigil or anything. It's not going to keep you up at night. It was originally a four-issue miniseries that they put in this trade, and of course, like all trades, you get the really cool. Look at that. You get some really cool, alternate covers. You get this really cool, like Dan Brereton alternate cover. Basically, the story is this director from like 750 years ago was making this great masterpiece of a horror movie, and there's this horrific event that happens, and he disappears. The film is never finished, and umpteen years later at a film festival, they decide they're going to show the never before seen footage from said movie, which unleashes chaos upon the town. A word of warning though, don't get too attached to too many characters in the story. Nobody's safe. Midnight Show, great read. You can find it online. Can't recommend it enough. I wish I could say the same for Junkyard Joe. Junkyard Joe was written by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. It's a nice comic to look at. Uh, the story is kind of neat. It follows this uh, Vietnam vet. His name was Muddy Davis, and he created this character Junkyard Joe based on events that happened to him in Nam. And like, I kind of get what they were going at with this because it takes place in Indiana, where this you know this family moves to Indiana for the dad's job. The mom died recently. There's all that kind of internal strife thing going on amongst the family members. I think the dad's like a tech guy, and he moves to Indiana, which I get the feeling Jeff Johns has flown over Indiana more times than he's been in it. If you're gonna move to Indiana, you're gonna move to Indiana to be in the pharmaceutical or the medical industry. But Junkyard Joe shows up and mayhem follows. It takes place over a Christmas season, and it's part of it was an Image comic that I guess was under the Mad Ghost imprint. It's a small part in a bigger story, but I think as much as I just kind of on it, it's a good story. It's a good one-off story. Like if you like stuff like Iron Giant, it's not as good as Iron Giant. But if you like that kind of stuff, and if you like robots in military gear, you know, like GI Robot, for instance, it's worth the read. I don't plan on following the whole bigger picture of the story because like I said, this is a good one-off series. If you haven't figured it out, judging by like the way GI Robot's kind of drawn here, Muddy Davis is a play on Jim Davis, who created Garfield, who's from Indiana. So I think that's why he decided to be clever. Jeff Johns decided to be clever and put it in Indiana. But the problem I have with this book is I can buy the robot, I can buy the the adversaries pursuing him. The family dynamic is played out pretty well, even though it's a little bit you can kind of figure out what's going to happen, and the art is great. But what I can't buy is small town Indiana being from small town Indiana. I can't buy small town Indiana celebrating all the different kinds of cultures in their Christmas parades. I could be wrong. Maybe there's one. Maybe this town is the one. This was also a Isabella recommendation, by the way, and for the most part, it's a good read. It's worth it, but like I said, I had a few hangups with it, which I can't say for the original Suicide Squad. I picked this trade up at Ollie's when me and my girlfriend were out road tripping over the summer, and this thing is Silver Age batshit insanity. It's absolute. It's the best. This version of Suicide Squad popped up in '59, I think. So there's not a lot of room for character development. It's mostly just action. Like each issue, you get what one panel of Rick Flag and Karen seen here, provided by the wonderful art of Michael Cho. Um, but you get one panel of like, I wish we could be alone. Well, we can't be alone because you know how the rest of the team feels about you. It would be bad for morale. So basically, these guys here all just have the hots for her, and in the '50s, you can't get too soap opera apparently unless you're in a soap opera comic. But this one has dinosaurs, which I didn't realize at the time. I bought this because I saw the cover. I'm like, what do you mean Suicide Squad fought dinosaurs? Again, I'm not the biggest DC guy. I know about the Suicide Squad and their various iterations, but I was not aware they fought dinosaurs. This particular volume has art by legends like Gene Colan and Joe Kubert, but it also has art by the most unsung artist in comic book history, Ross Andrew. Ross Andrew created the overall look for the book initially, and his later work on Spider-Man, oh, perfect. He's very underrated. He did a run on the original She-Hulk comic too, which that's like maybe they just had if they couldn't find somebody to put on something, they slapped Ross Andrew in there. But it's a good thing they did because it elevated the She-Hulk stories. And like I said, his Spider-Man stuff is wonderful. So yeah, like I said, found this at Ollie's like half off. I'm glad I picked it up because dinosaurs. Lastly, I want to talk about this. I picked this trade up the same day I picked up this one. It was a good day for comics. The Eternals by Jack Kirby. For me, this is the end all be all. This is the alpha, the omega. This is Jack Kirby at his absolute bombastic, ridiculous best. Not caring what he put on the page, just put whatever he wanted on the page. I think this was like a repurposed idea he had with, like, say, the New Gods because he'd left. I almost said Disney. He left DC at that time and came back over to Marvel. Was doing the Eternals. He was heavily influenced by 2001 by Arthur C. Clarke and Von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, which, by the way, I absolutely love that documentary. It's on YouTube. It's nuts. It's ridiculous. But when I want to like refresh my brain for like to go off into some kind of highly speculative world to basically just have a lot of fun coming up with absolute bonkers um, cosmic ideas, I default back to the Eternals and Chariots of the Gods. Kirby had nothing to prove by the time he came back to Marvel. He was doing this, he was doing Captain America, and unfortunately, this book got canceled after about a little over a year, I think. There's one annual thrown in here, which is nuts too. It's let me see if I can find a good example. Like you get this, you get absolute Jack Kirby bombacity. But I think at this point in time in comics, he was kind of outdated, which not for me he wasn't, but for a lot of kids who were growing up reading books like the X-Men maybe, he was not up to speed. Like for instance, I'm not sure what's going on here. I think he was like hammering out like some Farrah hair. So it's a little bit uh old fashioned maybe for a lot of people. Um Come on, where's like the I'll get to it, hang on. Like look at this. These giant splash pages are the best. One of the things I like, his writing's a little bit, but again, you're not reading this for the plot. Do it. One of the things I liked about the way this book was ran was typically he would do first page would be a splash page, second page double splash page, next page another splash page, and then it would break off into panels. Sometimes it would alternate. And the way I look at it, some people will criticize this approach that he had, where you're basically giving away all the best stuff in the beginning. But I think what it does is it creates a funnel. You get this grand design, for lack of a better term, and it slowly brings it in together, and then you're into the story. Yeah, and then he would wrap it up with a really good cliffhanger, and then you're right back into the Jack Kirby insanity. See, look at that. Who cares about plot? Speaking of plots, as I've said before, this is probably my favorite. This is my favorite Jack Kirby owned and operated 100% all him creation. This is him untethered. This is what I love. When when the movie was coming out, I was telling myself, there's no way they're gonna do this. Maybe they'll do the one that came out like in the early 2000s, which I read but don't remember anything about. Because this is a hot mess. Honestly, this is a hot mess. I'm not gonna lie. You're in it for fun. You're in it for just all the crazy names that he comes up with for things. The over the top action. The fact that this was basically self contained, because like the Hulk makes an appearance, but he's not, it's not the Hulk. This is its own world until after this book gets canceled and Roy Thomas brings it in Thor and turns it into a whole part of the 616. And if you know anything about the relationship between Roy Thomas and Jack Kirby, it makes sense why he did it. I'm conflicted because Roy Thomas is probably my favorite comic book writer. His run on Conan is incredible, but for me, it was Invaders, which I then, when that book got canceled, I think he hopped over to DC and took all of his ideas that he had left over for the Invaders and put it in All Star Squadron. I could be wrong. But anyway, getting back to that movie, it was terrible. I hated it. I hated every minute of it. Not because it didn't follow this unfollowable plot, but because they fell back on some lazy tropes. So it was just, to me, it just took what is easily one of the most fantastic books to look at, muted all the costumes. Yeah, see, here's Hulk. Or Hulk. Muted all the costumes and took one of the most tired and cliched plots out there and made it the plot. So anyway, that's going to do it for today. If you want me to do more stuff on comics, let me know. I'm going to do it whether you ask or not, but it's kind of nice to be asked. But while you're down there telling me to do more comics or telling me my views on some of these comics are dead wrong, do me a favor and do all the YouTube things down there. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification so you don't miss a single video. And most of all, thanks for watching.